Hey, you can't just walk around here like you own the place. The security guard's voice echoed through Beverly Center as dozens of shoppers turned to stare. A young man in a baseball cap and casual clothes was being followed by two uniformed guards. "We've been watching you for 20 minutes. What are you really doing here?" But what these security officers didn't know was that they were about to humiliate the most famous person on Earth. And what happened next would become the most talked about incident in retail history. If you want to know how one moment of profiling became a mall's biggest nightmare, hit subscribe. October 12, 1986, Beverly Hills. A man in dark sunglasses and simple clothing walked quietly through Beverly Center, one of Los Angeles's most exclusive shopping destinations. He wore a plain black jacket, jeans, and white sneakers. The baseball cap, pulled low over his face, made him blend in perfectly with the weekend crowd. Nobody recognized him as he entered through the main entrance, just another young person browsing the high-end stores. The man had specifically chosen to shop alone and dress casually because he wanted to experience normal retail therapy without the chaos that usually surrounded his public appearances. He wanted to browse quietly, maybe find some interesting clothes or gifts. And what he didn't anticipate was that his appearance would trigger the most humiliating shopping experience of his life. Frank Morrison had been head of security at Beverly Center for 8 years and took pride in keeping what he called undesirable elements away from the mall's upscale atmosphere. His team was trained to identify potential shoplifters and anyone who didn't fit the profile of Beverly Center's typical affluent customer base. The Morrison believed that maintaining the right kind of clientele was essential to protecting the mall's reputation. When Morrison spotted the young man in casual clothes wandering slowly through stores, several things triggered his suspicions. The stranger was young, black, dressed down, and seemed to be looking around more than actually shopping. Morrison had seen this pattern before and decided to keep an eye on this potential problem. The stranger moved from store to store, and spending time in each one, but not making purchases. He examined expensive items, spoke quietly to sales associates, and seemed particularly interested in electronics and clothing. Morrison's experience told him this was classic shoplifting behavior. Case the merchandise, test security, then strike when guards weren't watching. After 20 minutes of observation, Morrison decided to intervene. He approached the young man who was examining leather jackets in a boutique, flanked by two junior security officers. "Excuse me," Morrison said, his voice carrying authority. "I need to speak with you." The young man looked up, his face partially hidden by sunglasses and his cap. "Is there a problem, sir?" the stranger asked politely. Morrison studied him carefully. Early 20s, casual clothes, soft-spoken. Definitely not Beverly Center's usual customer type. "I'm Frank Morrison, head of security. We've been observing your behavior for 20 minutes, and frankly, it's concerning." The stranger remained calm. "I'm just shopping, sir. Looking at clothes and electronics. I haven't done anything wrong." "Really?" Morrison's tone became aggressive. 20 minutes, 5 different stores, examining expensive merchandise, no purchases. That's textbook suspicious behavior. Other shoppers were starting to notice. The two security officers positioned themselves to block escape routes, making this an official intervention. But here's where it got really ugly. Morrison stepped closer, using intimidation. "Let me be direct with you, son. This mall caters to a certain type of customer, people who can afford what we're selling. You've been wandering around looking at things you obviously can't afford. That makes me nervous." The stranger tried to stay diplomatic. I understand your concern, but I'm a legitimate customer. I was planning to make purchases after browsing. Morrison laughed dismissively. Purchases? With what money? He looked the young man up and down with disdain. Baseball cap, sneakers, casual clothes. You look 16. What could you possibly afford in these stores? Several shoppers were now watching. A well-dressed woman looked uncomfortable, but didn't intervene. I work in the entertainment industry, the stranger said quietly. Morrison became even more condescending. Entertainment industry. Let me guess, aspiring actor, musician, or waiting tables while chasing Hollywood dreams. His tone made clear what he thought of those ambitions. Morrison turned to address the gathering crowd. This is exactly why we have security protocols. Young people who think they can window shop in luxury stores like they're at the food court. Sir, the stranger maintained composure. I haven't broken any laws. I'm simply browsing like any other customer. Morrison became more aggressive. Any other customer? Look around. Why, do you see anyone else dressed like you? Do you see any other customers being followed by security? There's a reason for that. The crowd was growing. Morrison enjoyed the audience as he continued his performance. Let me explain about Beverly Center, Morrison said loudly. This isn't a public park. This is a private shopping destination for people who can afford luxury merchandise. We maintain a certain atmosphere here. But what Morrison didn't know was that someone in the crowd recognized the young man. Patricia Williams, a successful entertainment lawyer, had been watching with growing disgust. Something about the young man seemed familiar, and when he spoke, she realized who she was looking at. She approached Morrison confidently. Mr. Morrison, I think you need to stop this immediately. Morrison turned with irritation. Ma'am, this is a security matter. No, you're not, Patricia said firmly. You're publicly humiliating someone based on assumptions. That's called profiling. Morrison became defensive. This is standard security procedure for suspicious behavior. Patricia looked at the young man, then back at Morrison. Do you have any idea who you're accusing? But what she said next would change everything. That young man you've been humiliating is Michael Jackson. The words hit them all like a bomb. Conversations stopped. Shopping bags dropped. Every person in the crowd turned to stare at the man in the baseball cap. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, the biggest star on the planet. Morrison's face went white. That's not possible, he stammered. Patricia nodded toward Michael. Would you mind removing your cap and sunglasses? Michael looked around at the 50 people who had gathered, then slowly removed his baseball cap and sunglasses. The most recognizable face on earth was revealed. It was really him. Michael Jackson, standing in Beverly Center, having been accused of being a potential shoplifter. Morrison stood frozen, realizing what had just happened. He had treated Michael Jackson like a criminal because of his appearance. The corridor was dead silent. But what Michael Jackson did next shocked everyone. Michael looked at Frank Morrison with understanding rather than anger. Mr. Morrison, Michael said quietly, I want to ask you something important. Morrison was visibly shaking. If I wasn't Michael Jackson, Michael continued, would you have treated me any differently? Would you have followed and questioned any young black man in casual clothes the same way? The question hung in the air like a challenge everyone could feel. Morrison opened his mouth, but no words came because everyone knew the answer. "You said I don't belong here because of how I look," Michael said calmly. "You assumed I couldn't afford anything in these stores. You suggested I was exhibiting suspicious behavior by shopping while black and young." The crowd watched in stunned silence. "But you just showed 50 people what you really think about young black customers, regardless of who they are." Several people had tears in their eyes as they realized they had witnessed something significant. "How many other young people have you treated this way?" Michael asked. Morrison couldn't answer because they all knew. But what Michael did next will restore your faith in humanity. Michael looked around at the crowd. "Everyone, I apologize that your shopping was interrupted. No one should be treated as a potential criminal for browsing in stores." He turned back to Morrison. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to continue shopping now. I suggest you think about whether the person you showed these people is who you want to be." Morrison nodded weakly, hands shaking. "Mr. Jackson, please. I had no idea who you were." "That's exactly the problem," Michael said gently. "You didn't know who I was, so you felt comfortable treating me like a criminal based on my appearance." 15 minutes later, Morrison approached Michael in a music store. "Mr. Jackson, could I speak with you privately?" Michael nodded graciously. They walked to a quiet corner. "Sir, I need to apologize not just for mistaking your identity, but for treating any customer this way. You were right. I would have acted the same toward any young black man." Michael listened patiently. "I've been in security 15 years, always telling myself I was protecting the stores. But watching myself through your eyes today, I realized I've been profiling people based on prejudices I didn't know I had." Michael nodded. "The first step toward change is recognizing the problem exists." "I want to do better," Morrison said. "Would you help me understand how?" Michael spent 30 minutes talking with Morrison about unconscious bias, the difference between security and profiling, and creating welcoming environments. 3 months later, Beverly Center became the first major LA mall to implement anti-profiling training. Morrison used his own story as the primary example. Michael never spoke publicly about the incident, but Morrison sent him a letter months later. "You could have had me fired. Instead, you educated me and helped create a better environment. Security complaints have dropped 80% since the training." The shopping experience that started as humiliation became a catalyst for change throughout retail. Other malls copied Beverly Center's training program. That day proved something powerful about choosing education over revenge. Michael had every right to demand Morrison's termination. Instead, he chose understanding over anger, teaching over punishment. But the security guard who thought he was protecting the mall learned what a real security meant, making everyone feel safe and welcome, regardless of appearance. Based on real events and industry accounts,